and we'll go ahead and get started at about 2 minutes past the hour. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Chip Griffin. I am the founder and CEO of eOutreach. It's a company that I started back in 2000. We initially started doing media monitoring with traditional news websites. Over the years, we've added social media, social networks, government websites, policy websites, and a whole bunch of other things. So that's a little bit about the company. I'm happy to be joined today by Jen Zingsheim, who is our vice president who oversees our professional services group, which works with clients to help them better understand the coverage that they're getting and provide valuable reports to them that summarize the information but also draw insights from it. So she's a great person to be taking some time today to talk about measuring online influence, figuring out what it is and how you can use it effectively. I think most of you who are here know that online influence is one of the most hotly debated topics in communications today. It's one certainly I have no shortage of opinions on, but I'm mostly going to leave both the teaching and the opinions to Jen today, and I will focus more on interjecting periodic questions. Along those lines, there is a great questioning functionality here within GoToWebinar, so please don't hesitate to ask questions as we go along, and I'll insert them at appropriate points throughout the conversation. We'll also have a more detailed time period at the end of the presentation for Q&A and back and forth with Jen. So a little bit of background on myself. Other than having founded eOutreach back in 2000, I've been involved in professional communications for over 2 decades now. Started out in politics in Washington, D.C., and have had an opportunity to work in just about every role that you can think of. I've worked in companies, agencies, government, nonprofits, really it's run the gamut, and so it's given me a lot of useful perspective on the industry and the way that we can use different pieces of information. And I'll let Jen introduce herself more fully in just a moment, but just as a little bit of background on her, we're fortunate that she joined us, I think, about 6 years ago now, and she came to us with a background both in advocacy as well as in the agency world. So I think that gives her some unique perspectives that she can offer, not to mention the 6 years of working with clients to help them interpret all of the monitoring data that we provide. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Jen to introduce herself a little bit and tell you more about what she'll talk about. Jen?
Thank you very much, Chip. Glad to be here. It's nice to speak with you all about this topic. It's one that is growing by leaps and bounds. Every time you turn around, there's a new player on the block, it seems, a new tool, something else out there, and of course the the big dog, which is clout, and of course we'll be discussing that later. So what are we going to be discussing today? We'll be going over how you can identify which influencers matter to you and some of the things that you need to think about before you even start this process. Then we'll talk about using these online influence tools, and there are quite a few out there. We're only going to be looking at a handful of them today, both free tools, which of course is probably of interest to most people, and for power users there are some paid tools that are worth considering. You get what you pay for, really. And how to take those lists and build them out with research. I caution people every time they talk about influence tools that these really should be a starting point when you receive a list of influencers. It's not an end point. You don't just go jumping off from there. You need to research a bit too. These tools are in their infancy, so we'll be looking at some of the pitfalls and problems that are out there surrounding them and how you can adjust and kind of acclimate to those. And then how to develop an ongoing influencer identification system, which is important. If you're going to be doing this work, you want to make sure that you set it up so that you're not reinventing the wheel each time you need to go to an influencer list. Okay, there's a brief screen about Chip and a little bit more about me. Chip did mention that I was in the agency world. I worked for Fleischman Hillard, and one of the areas that I worked in, they house their grassroots marketing, which is what we used to call peer-to-peer marketing or anything like that, where you actually identify influencers. They house that in their public affairs division because when they started it, they found that most of the people who had an innate understanding of what they were looking for in an influencer and those kind of word-of-mouth processes were people who had campaign experience, because it's very much a part of politics and reaching out to groups of voters, things like that. So a lot of parallels there, and that's why they had initially housed it in their public affairs group. I also have done some advocacy work, so again, a little bit of influence work there. Which influencers matter? Leave it to me to start this off with a kind of trick question. It depends, really. You need to look at what your goals are. The most important thing, I think, to start off with is looking at what is influence. Influence is something that produces a change. An influencer is going to change a behavior or a pattern, or maybe initiate an action that would not have occurred without that intervention. What most of these online tools really measure is how effective a person is at moving information online. Because of the limitations of measuring things online, they can't really, an online tool like Clout cannot give you a measurement and say, yes, by getting Justin Bieber to talk about this particular product, X number of people ran out and purchased it, which would really be the true measurement in that example. So when you're talking about measurement, the most important thing you can do is set a baseline. You need to know where you are first before you look at how things or what had an impact. So set a baseline first. You're looking to measure a change. You want to report that. So do your research, do your baseline setting first. This next one seems kind of obvious, know your objectives, but I think that a lot of people don't really put as much thought into what they're looking for before they start a program, because they have a tendency to apply offline techniques and offline thought processes to online influencer outreach. And it's a little bit different. You have to look at, looking at different perspectives, knowing, who are you going to select as influencers? What are your messages going to be? What's your timing? Your strategy and tactics are going to be a little different online than they are in the offline world. An influencer program to raise awareness is going to be very different than one that seeks to drive a purchase or to make a charitable donation or anything like that. So know what your objectives are before you start researching your influencers. It'll help you a lot. Influence is contextual, and I think this is it's the hardest thing for online tools to really kind of get their arms around the context thing. So my first bullet here is Justin Bieber versus Charlie Borman. I would have to guess that most of the people listening to this webinar have heard of Justin Bieber, particularly if they have tween girls at home. I am guessing that most people don't know who Charlie Borman is. Now, my husband is a big motorcyclist. He loves to ride. Pardon me?
I was going to say, I'm certainly in that category, so I'm looking forward to hearing who Charlie Borman is.
Well, I will get to that. My husband's a big motorcyclist, and Charlie Borman is someone who has traveled with Ewan McGregor of the Star Wars new trilogy fame. They did a recording, a movie documentary called Long Way Around, where the two of them rode a BMW R1200 GSAs, these great big off-road motorcycles, around the world. So Justin Bieber, who has a perfect clout score of 100, versus Charlie Borman, who has a clout score of 58. If you look at the two of them just based on their clout scores, Justin Bieber comes out on top. But if you're marketing to an audience of motorcyclists, they are not going to care who Justin Bieber is. They are going to care who Charlie Borman is. And I would actually drill down one level further and say it's mostly going to be adventure bike stylists that would look at Charlie Borman, not necessarily your pleasure riders or your Harley riders, or it's people that like to take their bikes off-road on these long, huge trips. So again, it's context. You can't just look at the numbers. You have to look at context. Who you reaching out to and why. Situation and setting. This is a big part of context, and I think that it's one that can sometimes be missed because the world shrinks online. You don't really think necessarily about oh, well, if we're going to be targeting this to a specific area, you really need to realize that although your messages are going to be going out to everyone online, if your audience is narrow, that's really who you should be targeting for. What do I mean by that? Well, if you have someone in a city or state with a high influence score, but who talks about things that are not relevant to your event, that's not going to be as impactful as someone with a lower score who, say you're setting up a taste of Chicago, and you have a blogger from downstate who has a very high clout score, and really what they talk about mostly are, I don't know, celebrities and keeping up with the Kardashians. That is going to be someone who is going to be less impactful for you than someone who is in Chicago and is a resident foodie expert, even if the foodie expert's clout score is lower than the downstate person who is enamored with the Kardashians. Relevance matters. I came across an interesting post on Jay Baer's blog. He made a reference to something that I had missed when it happened the first time around. About a year ago, he said that Chris Brogan, who is a very influential online business person, had received a leather jacket from Wilson Leather and did a video kind of blog about it, discussing this jacket. Now, it would seem at first glance that this would be a huge thing for Wilson Leather. I mean, they get this really successful, highly followed business blogger to talk about their jacket. But I'm not sure that the relevancy was necessarily there. Most of Chris's posts are more targeted to, business issues rather than a clothing issue. Yes, business people would buy jackets, but I'm not sure that it's necessarily the most logical connection. So making sure that your outreach is relevant and logical matters. Know your audience. Again, this is seemingly obvious, but we'll go over it. Where are they online? Are they mostly on Twitter? Are they on Twitter and Facebook? Are they following particular blogs? All of this will feed into your research that you're going to be building on the initial clout scores, or whoever you end up going with for an initial influence score. Some of these tools, like Clout, Peer Index, well, most of them actually feed from Twitter as their base material. And this has a lot to do with the openness of Twitter. Most of these tools allow you to link up other social networks to them. Clout has a whole bunch. You can link your Facebook account, you can link your WordPress, you can link Foursquare, a whole bunch of them. Flickr, I think, also you can link to Clout. So Clout allows you to add all of these other components of your online identity, but I believe that the last time I checked, you still had to go in and proactively do that. They actually got in a little bit of trouble last year for proactively adding Facebook scores to their Clout scores, and it caused a little bit of blowback because they were actually grabbing the identities of minors that were on Facebook and creating Clout scores for them. So they've since dialed that back. Along your audience lines, who are they paying attention to? This doesn't have to mean that those are necessarily the influencers, although they certainly could be. It could also help point you to possible links with your product or initiative. If they are, paying a lot of attention to a specific celebrity who is involved in breast cancer research, it might behoove you to, if you are doing a breast cancer run, reach out to that celebrity. What will you be asking of them? The ask is important. If it's too complicated or too expensive, your results are probably not going to be as good as they would be if you had something that was a little bit more conducive to an online audience. Basically, if you're looking for coupon redemption, you're probably going to have a better response to influencer outreach than if you're asking your influencer to direct their audience to purchase a new Mercedes. It's just, you have to pay attention to that sort of thing. I haven't seen anyone try and plug a luxury vehicle, with the exception of Audi, which ran a Clout perk that allowed you to do a screensaver. Now, again, I'm not quite sure exactly what Audi's objectives were in running that perk. If it was just to build awareness, that's fine. If it was supposed to be tied to a purchase, that probably is not going to be as successful. Okay, so moving to the meat of things, online influencer identification tools. I've mentioned Clout a couple of times. Clout I saw it referred to as the Kleenex of influence tools. It has become almost the de facto term. They were founded in 2008, but I think really kind of hit it big a couple of years ago, and probably 2010 is when I really started seeing a lot of references to Clout. That's also when they started, rolling out things like perks and have since added the plus K feature, which allows people to award others a plus K, kind of giving them a boost in topic areas, and that can be gained. It can be kind of toyed with a little bit. Some people have fun with it, so you do have to be careful if you're paying attention to something like a plus K as a filter for your influencer outreach. You really do need to make sure that your research backs up that plus K. Clout looks at reach, amplification, and network to reach their score, and as I mentioned earlier, you can add all kinds of other social networks to help enhance or boost your score. Clout swears up and down that your score does not go down if you don't add those additional ones in, but they definitely are interested in having a more rounded picture. I'm constantly getting prompts to add my Facebook account for a more accurate picture, and I have elected not to do that. So it's up to the user. Peer Index is similar in that it is also largely based on Twitter and also allows you to add some other social networks. It, however, decides to it assesses a topic fingerprint based on what you discuss. That's kind of how they try and get to the context angle. Now, it's interesting. I looked at my topics, and it says one of my top topics is the Netherlands. I have no idea how they arrived at that. I don't recall ever tweeting about the Netherlands. So, as with all of these, an algorithm is making these decisions and determinations. So you have to make sure that you pay attention and again, do your research. Cred is the new-ish kid on the block, and I say new-ish because they actually launched in beta, I think, September of last year. I think they came out 4 days before I gave a presentation on influence tools, so I quickly added them at the last minute. So this is a field that continues to evolve and change. They look at they have a transparent algorithm. That's what makes them different. They'll tell you what goes into their scoring. And they look at 2 factors, influence and outreach. And outreach is really, how you interact with your community. What do you share? Do you share a lot? Do you help others a lot? And so those are the free tools that are kind of at the top of the pile right now. Paid tools, again, there are many, many of them out there. Tracker is, I think, an interesting one. They have been around for a few years also. They work on a keyword search-based system. You enter the keywords that you are interested in tracking, and based on those keywords, they provide you a list of your, what they call an A-list of influencers. So that's their way of addressing the context angle or the context problem. It does get you pretty close to that. Tracker One is their solution for solo professionals or people on limited budgets. These are kind of preformed lists. They seem good, but I would also be very cautious because they are preformed lists. They use very generic terms, it seems, and that doesn't give you the exact really good results that you would get with the more targeted keyword searches that are exactly relevant to your topic areas. I think Chip and I took a look at the one that was their top list for politics, and it was, I think, a head scratcher for both of us. There just weren't a lot of people on there that I would have tagged as being influential online in politics, so not quite sure how they arrive at that. But it is a good thing to check out. PeakU, this is a freemium model. This is actually more of an additional tool than a substitute for a online influence tool. It gives you audience demographics. I have to say, this one's almost a little creepy to me. It pulls from all publicly available data out there, and any public record that is available online. So I would guess that home purchases would be fair game and things like that. And they are in the process of getting a patent for their method of matching online monikers to real names. So that was an interesting one that caught my attention. Group High, this one is new to me, but it does appear to be kind of an interesting one. It shows information on blogs, including things like SEO rank, shares, where the blog is located. This is more blog directed than directed at individuals, but of course individuals at prominent blogs might be good influencers. So again, a lot of this is not cut and dry. You have to look at a wide variety of things. Opinions is another one. I didn't put it on the screen. That's available too. I believe that's also a paid subscription-based service. So how do you build out your list with research? I don't need research. I have a list. I'll just go out and I approach all of these influencers based on the top 25 clout scores that I was able to find. I really wouldn't recommend that approach. I've seen it done, and it usually has some kind of ramification or blowback. Online tools measure online activity. They cannot take into account things that happen offline. If you are looking for an influencer and just have 2 scores, the higher one does seem better, but what if the person with the lower score has written a book about your topic? You have to do that additional research. Limitations of online tools, you always want to look at context. There are lots of limits. If you have someone who is very active on Facebook and not so active on Twitter, and they don't have their Facebook score linked to their clout profile or peer index profile, then you're going to get a falsely low score. This is particularly important if your audience is mostly on Facebook, so you've just kind of missed that influencer if you're discounting them because of a low clout score, and yet the clout score is only tracking Twitter. And I don't believe that there's any way that you can know that without looking at the research or without doing your own research. Another thing is you could have someone who has a very popular blog but chose not to tweet very often. So again, you don't want to simply write off people with a low-ish clout score. So what do? You use Google. I mean, it sounds, again, so basic, but hit Google. You have a list of influencers and start researching the heck out of them. Check out their profiles, both on Twitter and if they have them on Facebook. Review their tweets. See how often they talk about this topic. See how they're talking about the topic. One of the interesting things, I don't think that it's this way anymore, but clout used to have me as one of my top topics was clout. Well, all you would have to do is really drill down and look at the how I had tweeted about them or what I had blogged about, and most of the reason that I was discussing clout was because I had some questions about clout's efficacy. So, I would not be a good outreach target for someone who would be cheerleading clout. I would be a good outreach target for someone who perhaps had some questions or concerns about clout. If your influencers have blogs, review them. Again, look for the discussion of the topics that you are interested in. Do they blog about your issues sometimes, a lot of the time, often? That matters. And if they talk about your topic a lot, they're going to be probably more influential than someone who just mentions your topic every once in a while, even if it's a very prominent person. If you have blogs, review them is really important, just as it is for any blogger outreach. CC Chapman is a friend of ours, mine and Chip's, and he has been referred to and targeted as a mom blogger on a couple of occasions. This kind of gets under his skin because it's really, really easy to go to his blog and find out he is a he, and then that it's really basic stuff like that, I think, can either make or break. If you don't do it, it can really make you look silly. If you do it, it can make you look really smart. So invest time in your research. This doesn't have to be a huge, arduous process, but you do need to set aside some time to do this right. If you are given the commandment that you must have a list of influencers within 3 hours, keep the list really short so you have time to, vet those handful of influencers that you are able to find. Haste does lead to mistakes. We see this all the time online. Mistakes are not deadly, but if you can avoid them by spending a little time doing research, it will help you in the long run. So pitfalls and problems. When 100 isn't good enough, the question that I made mention to at the beginning with the perfect clout score of Justin Bieber of 100, a lot of people confuse celebrity and popularity with influence. There was an issue a couple of years ago. A bunch of celebrities banded together. They were going to raise money for a charity, and what they decided to do was conduct, and it's just so creepy sounding, but a digital death. They were going to sign off of Twitter until they raised, I think it was $1 or $2 million for this particular charity. First of all, I think it's questionable where you decide that you are going to leave your communications tool until you raise enough money. But the flip side, of this is their influence. These celebrities that logged off of Twitter started to get twitchy about the end of week 1 or week 2 because they weren't anywhere near raising the fundraising goal that they had. It just didn't have the impact that they thought they were going to have, and they were only asking for donations of 50 cents or $1, very low dollar amount. Twitter moves fast. People don't necessarily see these things the first time they go around, and if you're compounding that problem by dropping off of Twitter, it's, again, make sure that you're looking at true influence and not celebrity or popularity when you are doing your influencer identification. What I've referred to as the vacation conundrum. This is one that really gets under people's skin online. If you are offline for a week or two, your clout score will drop. It's based on your activity levels. And my point to this is, does anyone actually become less influential because they've taken a vacation, or, heaven forbid, taken the time to deal with client issues rather than, they have to dial down their Twitter activity for a few weeks? So keep that in mind too. If someone's clout score has plummeted, you look at their scoring, it's probably not that they've all of a sudden become completely non-influential. It's probably because they took a few weeks off. Shifting sands or algorithms. These tools do change their algorithms. Clout's done this a couple of times, and people lose their minds. They did a big one in October, and a bunch of people decided that Clout was worthless as a tool because they changed their algorithm. Some people had based entire promotions on certain Clout, achieving certain Clout scores, and when Clout changes its algorithm, all of a sudden huge swaths of people are no longer qualifying for the Clout perk. So know that if you base a promotion off of reaching a Clout score of 40, that could change without warning. Clout does not have to notify you that they are going to be modifying their algorithm. Posers, peacocks, and conscientious objectors. There are a lot of people who have become very adept at increasing their score on these online influence tools, and they do so by interacting a lot with other people with high Clout scores. It doesn't mean that they have any real depth to their influence. They just have a high score. The peacocks out there, you might not measure up to them. There are a lot of people that take very much pride in their high Clout score and just can't be bothered to help you out with your project. Conscientious objectors, there are a number of influencers who have decided for one reason or another to remove their profile from Clout and other tools. That does not mean that they are no longer influential. It simply means that they no longer have a profile on Clout and they might not show up. This is show up in your influence searching. This is another reason that you need to do a lot of really good research. Danny Brown is the one that comes to my mind. He removed his Clout profile. That does not make him any less of an influencer within the marketing field. He's still very active and has a large audience. So creating an online influencer identification practice. Well, why should you bother? Staying connected is really important. I'm starting to see more and more discussion from bloggers where they feel kind of like they have been used by brands. The brands are there for the duration of the campaign, and then they drop off and they don't hear from them again until the brand has another campaign up and running. You should really look at this at building an influencer outreach influencer database as an ongoing relationship. It's an ongoing process. You're looking for a long-term connection between you and the influencers. And this is in my humble opinion where the next great evolution in marketing and PR thought is going to come from, is the realization that what we've come to expect out of marketing, which are short-term campaigns of 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, those are not going to be, just doing something within that window is not going to be adequate for maintaining a relationship with an influencer or a blogger. Staying current, things change, bloggers change. They change their minds, they change their topics, they decide that they are no longer going to write about mom issues now that their kids are in college. They're going to switch over to, I don't know, some other topic, a foodie blog. So, you don't want to develop that list of influencers, do your outreach, have success with it, stick it in a drawer, and then a year later expect to have the exact same results with the exact same list. It's important to keep that list current. and so you're ready to go when the need arises. One of Chip's previous webinars was on crisis communications, and I've spent a lot of time focusing on kind of the product and charity fundraising angles to online outreach, influencer outreach, but there's always that the crisis communications aspect of it too. Your influencers are going to have audiences throughout the year, and maintaining a relationship with them is important if the need arises. Maintaining any list is like maintaining your house or maintaining your car. It's a lot easier to do little bits at a time than it is to try and get everything up to speed, because you never know when you're going to need to pull the trigger and go. And that is all I had established for the influencer outreach program. Do we have any questions?
Well, I certainly know that I do, and first of all, I want to thank you, Jen, for the great content there. It certainly provided a lot of food for thought, and I'll have to tell you, as you were going, I was writing down questions, and to be honest with you, you answered a lot of them as the rest of the conversation went forward. But let me kick it off, and I know people are sending in questions. I can see them starting to come in now, so everybody go ahead and submit your questions through the tool there on the control panel. But what would you say is the biggest mistake that people make when they're trying to put together an influence program? Is it being too fast? Is it not being thorough? Is it expecting too much of the tools? How would you boil it down if you had to say this is the one thing that you shouldn't make the mistake of doing?
I think skimping on the research, and that's why I hammered away at that so much. It's so easy to slip into the trap of, hey, there's this cool free tool, all I have to do is X and it will tell me Y and I can go and do Z. And it's really just not that easy. There are so many additional layers that you need to go through to make sure that your influencers are truly going to be influential to your audience. The Charlie Borman example is a perfect one. It's, well, at least for the purposes of illustration, it's, if you're doing a generic motorcycle safety program, he would be a good one to reach out to. If you're doing something that's targeted to, I don't know, sport bikes, he's not going to, because he's not going to be a good outreach target. And you have to not only know your audience, but you have to take the time to go beyond typing the word motorcycle and clout and coming up with a list of influencers. You have to know a little bit about them and make sure that those influencers actually matter to your audience. So taking shortcuts, I think.
Is it fair to say that some of these tools are sort of like an old-fashioned library card catalog? I mean, it's a starting point, but it doesn't. You can't turn it in as your research paper.
Yes, I think that's a very good example. Yeah, this is a starting point. You're not going to take this list and then immediately shoot off an email to someone on the list and say, hey, could you please promote our product? It's, it's a process. The whole thing is a process. It's a starting point. And they do a great job of that. The web is huge. Thank goodness we have these tools that help us get started. But they should be viewed as a jumping off point, not as an end point.
Great. We have a question that relates to one of your slides, and that's the heading on one of your slides was Google Foo. And so the question is, what is Google Foo and how do I use it?
Yes, that's an online slang term, Urban Dictionary. It basically means that, Google Foo is someone with a lot of Google prowess, that they can sit there and, type a string of search terms in and immediately have the perfect search results. So that was my fault for using internet slang instead of appropriate language. So that's what Google Foo is. Just
if I use slang in one of my white papers, you would knock it right out of there.
I would.
But yes, so we couldn't go looking for Google Foo online and in the Google Labs or something and figure out how to use it. Okay.
Yeah. You could Google Foo and you would get the definition.
Gotcha. Okay. We have another question. What about the importance of establishing online allies before a crisis? And I think you touched on this a little bit, but can you use your influencer program to establish that base of support before something happens?
Sure, and I think it's a very good one. I think that it adds depth to your crisis plans to make sure that you have both online and offline names. I mean, so many people in the traditional PR world know that it's important to have those media contacts in place before you have a crisis hit, and you know that journalist X, Y, and Z will actually listen to you when a crisis hits. The same goes for online. Using any of these influence tools to start finding the people that are truly influential within your audience or within your target audience, and establishing a relationship with them before something happens is critical. Yeah, I would look at it as just part of your components for developing a good crisis communications plan.
Great. Another question is, are the numbers that these services produce, are they worth anything? I mean, I guess I would go beyond that and say, are they worth the pixels on the screen that they consume? Can you tell anything from the numbers? Obviously you mentioned some of the services give you numbers. Some will just give you a list of people who are influential on a topic. So talk a little bit about the quantification aspect.
Sure, it's a good question, and quite frankly, it's a loaded question because there seem to be two camps out there: the ones that love having this information, and the ones that loathe having this information out there, because there are so many additional factors that weave into it. Do these numbers matter? Yes, they do. If you have to look at what they're able to quantify and why. It's the ability to move information online, and that is, let's be honest, that is a component. That is an important thing. If you are, conducting outreach, or if you are addressing a crisis, knowing how someone's how someone's audience responds to things that they put out there is important. It helps you to develop an ongoing program with them. Is it the be-all, end-all? No. I'm reminded of a Wired article that was made the rounds a few months ago, where a marketer sat down for a job interview and was blindsided by a question about his cloud score and ended up not getting the job, and spent time working diligently to raise his cloud score, not really doing anything different, with his work. He was just attacking things differently online to improve his score, and he made the statement of 15 years of experience didn't matter. What mattered was this number. And that, I think, is kind of a sad state of affairs, really, that someone's background and prowess in marketing and didn't account for as much as having, not having the score that this particular company had set at its bar. And I do believe that the article concluded with the person who actually did get the job, who had the much higher cloud score, eventually fizzled out within 3 months. And so, are they everything? No. Are they something? Yes. They're a starting off point. All of these tools are in their infancy. I think that we will continue to see pressure on them to be better at what they're doing, and with that will come the more the real changes that we as communicators are looking for.
Yeah, let me follow up on that. So, setting aside the lunacy of a company hiring, apparently primarily based on one of these scores, if I'm a communicator, should I care what my score is, and should I be proactively taking steps to increase it? Again, setting aside the outliers that want to hire based on that number.
Well, I think that my personal opinion is, once you start paying attention to the score is rendered meaningless. Once once that becomes your objective, there are ways that you can go about addressing having a low score and making it a high score. And to me, it's more important to just do good work and have good references, But there are others out there that would counsel that you should, pay attention to your score and do what you need to do to keep it up there. I think that there are a lot of opinions out there on that. I can't come down one way or the other.
Okay.
Too hard.
You touched, in your talk, you touched on the online versus offline influence. And so I have a two-part question. One is, how do you deal with, what I would call the Obama-Buffett problem, where you have obviously influential people who, based on raw perception of what they do online, may not get a high online influence score. And secondly, are there any tools that you're aware of that bring in any aspect of that offline influence? Is there anything out there that's trying to marry the two together, or is that purely as a friend of mine would say, a hydraulic research operation?
I am tackling your second question first. I am not aware of any that do. I think PeakU is trying to do that, but again, they're just using different online data. It's awfully hard to, without human touch or interaction or review, to identify someone who has an online presence, who has, say, written a book on a topic or who teaches a course on a topic, and incorporate that into their scoring. I think that that's something that, for now at least, is largely a manual process. As far as your first question with the Warren Buffett, Obama, this is where common sense just has to play into this. PeakU, again, going back to that one, when they first launched, I don't know if it was an alpha or their initial beta, but there were a couple of blog posts written about it, and one of them seemed to indicate that an online individual had a higher score than, I think it was, Mitt Romney. And you have to look at, well, common sense has to play into it. You cannot say that someone who has a small marketing audience online is more influential than a presidential candidate. Maybe within the marketing community about a marketing topic, yes, but as far as just raw influence, I'd say that someone who's on television almost 24/7 probably has more visibility and influence than someone that you and I know, but probably doesn't go to additional audiences. So common sense.
It strikes me that one of the biggest challenges here is that there's a disconnect between influence and what you're talking about versus what your audience perceives you to be influential about. And let me clarify that a little bit. So I talk about a lot of different topics in social media, and over the last year or so I've talked a lot about running because it's something that I've picked up. So if you were to take a look at my top topics, I suspect running would probably be one of the ones there. But at the same time, I don't think runners per se are looking to hear from me. I think you're more likely to find entrepreneurs and communicators who would find me influential. So I guess the question is, are there any services out there that you're aware of that try to look at it from that perspective as opposed to just being a sort of a follower and a content of tweet or posts type analysis? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I think, based on the way that you framed this question, that peer index might be one that gets close to that, because they don't just look at the raw topics that you discussed. They look at additional topics and how people respond to the topics that you tweet about or reference online. So that's where you get the topic fingerprint. So that might be one that gets a little bit closer to that. But again, these are online tools. Most of what they can measure is how things, how people respond to what you post. So they're either going to be looking at the volume and the distribution, like how far it goes, how many retweets you get. They're going to be looking at the number of followers, perhaps even the number of followers you gain on specific times, the rate of follower increase. And some of the algorithms are going to be able to look at the content of what you discuss and layer some intelligence on top of that. But they are not humans, and they cannot make value judgments.
Now these tools, one of the questions that we have here is, are these tools for communicators or for consumers? And I think by that what is meant is, are they, something like Clout that has these perks and those sorts of things, I guess those could be perceived more as being for communicators, right? Sort of Groupon style, giving offers, what have you, versus perhaps some of the paid ones that you mentioned, where it seems like those are more for communicators. I mean, are there distinctions there between the services, either where they are today or where you think they're headed, that we should be thinking about?
I think that, well, going back to Cloud, and PeerIndex also has some kind of perk program. I think that they're trying to address both sides of that issue. They're trying to be, because quite frankly that's where the money is, they're trying to be a I don't know, tool for business, so that those businesses come to them and say, hi, we'd like to sponsor this Clout perk or this PeerIndex perk because we're interested in disseminating the information. Please make it available to people who tweet about, I don't know, wine, who have Clout scores over 50. And then, for the people on the other end, if they tweet about wine and have a Clout score over 50, they get this perk. So it's trying to be both. I think those are trying to be both. The paid tools are clearly designed for companies that have the money to purchase and use them. I barely glazed over Tracker, but Tracker is one where there are different, you pay based on the campaigns that you run, and like I said, it is keyword based. It's a very it's not a cheap tool, but it will get you a lot closer to that context that you're looking for, and it's kind of doing some of that research work that I've mentioned for you. So if you kind of need to look at where are you going to spend your money. Are you going to spend it on people doing the research themselves, or are you going to spend it on the tool that does a lot of that research for you? So I think that that they address both. There is some question about how successful some of these perks programs are. There was recently an article on TechCrunch talking, Clout was touting, that they've done X number of perks, or they've awarded X number of perks since they launched. And the question is, are those perks doing what they are designed to do? Are they amplifying messages? Are people purchasing more product based on this additional component of messaging? And I don't know that we will ever have that information unless the companies themselves decide to write the case studies.
Gotcha. Great. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to share all this insight with us. Before we go, I do want to say, oftentimes on these webinars we will share a demo at the end. Today we don't have time to do that and still be respectful of people's time. So what I would say to folks who may be interested in learning more about our products, our primary products are Custom Scoop, which is news and social media monitoring, and it's a dashboard and all that kind of thing. We also have the Issue Sonar Public Affairs dashboard, which has collaboration tools, things like project tracking, contact management, document sharing. And then we also have our professional services group that I alluded to at the beginning that Jen heads up, that does daily, weekly, monthly newsletters, news briefings, analytical reports, those sorts of things customized for individual clients. So if you're interested in knowing any more about any of those things, feel free to reach out to us. You can reach me at chip@eOutreach.com. You can reach Jen at Zingsheim at eOutreach.com. There we go. We've got the
My
phone
name
number also. And I don't think we got to every question here in the room. So if anybody has a question that we didn't answer that you'd like more information on, feel free to ask us about that too. So again, thank you, Jen, for your time. We really appreciate it and look forward to hearing from you again in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.